people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
De la noche, Stephanie Pineiro.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears this weekend, unbeaten up-and-comer from Puerto Rico, Stephanie Pineiro, will be returning to action opposite the ring seasoned journeywoman from the United States, Miranda Barber, in what is a junior middleweight contest scheduled for 8 rounds.
Junior middleweight, that's where Terry Harper currently reigns as that division's WBA champion.
And where Natasha Jonas not that long ago used to reign as that division's unified and Ring Magazine champion. She has since moved down in weight down to welter.
I can only imagine now that she's moved down in weight and become a champion at welter, the belts she held at junior middle will be up for grabs, and at least one of them will be on the line in the Femke Hermans versus Mary Spencer rematch.
At least one.
That's set to go down later on this year in the fall as it pertains to Pineiro versus Barber.
Stephanie Pineiro last saw action earlier this year, back in February.
She debuted as a professional in September of 2019. She only fought once that year, only fought once in 2020, the year the pandemic hit.
Missed out on all of 2021, came back in December of 2022, and returned to action earlier this year, back in February. If you're wondering why Stephanie hasn't been more active, it's a combination of things, toggling between the pros and the amateurs.
She's been doing that.
Whatever effect the global shutdown may have had on her very young professional boxing career, in tandem with toggling from the pros back to the amateurs, back to the pros, you get the sense that now Stephanie will make more of a commitment to the pro game.
Now, in her last fight, we saw her take on Argentina's own seasoned journeywoman veteran, Yamila Reynoso. Tough customers. She's been in there with the likes of Amanda Serrano, many others. She's never been stopped.
And having taken in that fight, Yamila Reynoso gave Stephanie a stiffer test, a bit more competition than what she's used to, at least in the pro game, a more seasoned fighter than any fighter that Stephanie had fought so far. I would say that Miranda Barber is a step down, a step backwards from a Yamila Reynoso.
I'm okay with that.
And what is Stephanie's 5th professional bout, her 5th professional fight, I'm okay with her fighting these kinds of opponents because these are developmental fights. It's all about garnering experience and getting rounds in the bank.
That's it.
Miranda Barber has lost 4 of her last 6 fights. 4 of her last 6, having last seen action a few weeks ago opposite the ring, unbeaten O'Shea Jones.
Dropped the decision.
And as stated, she is a step backwards, I think, from a Yamila Esther Reynoso. Miranda is a little bit more beatable.
I think she is.
Perhaps having taken in Stephanie's performance with Yamila, a far more experienced professional than she is, they've elected to take their foot off the gas a bit. It did seem early to be fighting somebody like Yamila Reynoso.
Somebody that experienced?
Saw very good range control from Stephanie Pineiro in that fight. You know, she's not just tall for the weight, long for the weight. She's got good distance control.
Creating space.
Using those legs, beating those feet. She's not just a hard puncher.
She can box.
She can move. What can we expect this weekend opposite the ring, Miranda Barber? Well, Miranda...
she's a journeywoman.
So even amongst journeywomen, there are levels, there are tiers. I would say that Yamila Reynoso is a more put-together fighter than Miranda Barber is. Miranda's as game as any gatekeeper, as any journeywoman you'll find, but she's not actually a put-together fighter. There's not a world title challenger or a world title contender in Miranda Barber.
I don't see one.
Miranda's a scrapper, a scrappy fighter, often losing form when putting punches together, wild flurries,
big looping shots,
looping counters. Stephanie Pineiro is the more statuesque fighter of the two, the longer, more limber fighter, more fleet of foot fighter as well. So her distance control it will come in handy.
Those long levers.
Remembering to box, using her pedigree, and not falling in love with her own punching power. Not all of these girls are going to fall down off the first hard shot that lands.
Miranda Barber, like Yamila Reynoso, she's never been stopped. She's never been knocked out. She doesn't have as many fights as Yamila Reynoso has.
So all the same, she's proven to be a stubborn customer, a stubborn fighter so far.
I'll say it would be impressive if Stephanie Pineiro manages to knock her out, as she would be the first to have done it.
Stephanie's not just a heavy-handed fighter. She's athletic. She's got a good set of legs under her. She can move, and she can be a sharpshooter. Coming forward, playing the aggressor, or moving backwards, being the defender.
She's good at that.
Getting shots off while she does it. Singles, well-placed straight punches from the outside coming in or from the inside moving out.
She's got legs.
Legs to move, legs to sharpshoot, and I anticipate this weekend that's what she's going to do with Miranda Barber, the kind of fighter that wants to stay close with you, stay on you, play you close to the chest, to let go of wild punches and flurries.
Surprise me if Stephanie scores a few knockdowns, maybe even a knockout, because as stated, Miranda Barber, she loses form when letting her hands go. She's open to be countered.
Open to be hit. I anticipate Stephanie Pineiro will stay in the winner's bracket, stay undefeated, and rack up another W.
Keep your eyes peeled for that this weekend.
Everything's going good. He just texted me. Yesterday and said that Spence activated his rematch. Is that polymonology up there?
Police here, yeah.
The fuck? Oh, yeah. He just activated his rematch.
That's confirmed, is it?
Huh?
That's confirmed.
That's confirmed, but we don't have a date and stuff like that yet.
So do you expect that fight to happen before the end of the year?
I'm hoping.
And so the official word from Brian Bomac McIntyre, Terence Crawford's longtime trainer, is that Errol Spence Jr. has, in fact, invoked his rematch clause, and there will be a second fight. Few passing thoughts.
Showtime can't be happy about this, given how lopsided the first fight was. The chances of selling more pay-per-views in a second.
What the fighters are going to want to get paid for a rematch versus what the pay-per-view actually stands to bring in.
It's not like it was controversial, the first fight. It's not like it had a controversial ending like Canelo versus Golovkin 1 or Wilder versus Fury 1.
You don't have a controversy to help sell a second fight. The first fight, for the most part, was a lopsided fight. It was a lopsided beating.
It was.
I think that the people at Showtime and the PBC would have preferred that Errol go in another direction, though for me and my money, it wouldn't have been the first time that he went against the grain. The fight even happening at all is indicative, at least to me, that he's gone against the grain before. He means to do that again with this rematch.
Boxing insider Rick Glacier has been adamant throughout that he expects Errol Spence Jr. to invoke that rematch clause, and he expects that he'll get beat even faster in a second fight than he did in the first.
He's at least half right. Errol has invoked that rematch clause, and if history is any indicator of things to come, he'll get beat again. He'll get beat again, even worse. I happen to agree with that. For Rick, this is Errol Spence Jr. cashing out.
Do you remember
2 or 3 years ago when Errol Spence Jr. said, in his own words, he could have retired after the car accident. He could have retired right then and there, and that he's here for a good time, but not a long one.
That tweet from 2 or 3 years ago seems indicative, at least to me, that Errol's cashing out.
Will there be any belts on the line? I anticipate that between now and the time it takes them to get both boys in the ring, there may be 1 or 2 belts on the line. The current undisputed champion at this weight, Jermell Charlo, he's set to fight all the way up there at 168.
It's already been decided.
As soon as he sets foot in the ring the night of the fight, the WBO title will be forfeit, will be vacated, and Tim Tszyu will be elevated to full champion, leaving the other 3. I anticipate that either the WBC or the WBA or both
might become vacant.
Both the WBC and the WBA titles may be on the line in Spence versus Crawford, which would presumably take place at 154 pounds. I don't think it'll take place at welterweight.
Already some rumors and rumblings immediately after the fight as to what the contracted weight for a rematch, if there were to be a rematch, where would it be? And Terence Crawford said he's open to taking Spence on again at 154.
Whilst doing his victory lap, he let it be known that he is open to that possibility, that proposition. What are Spence's chances in a second fight? What are his chances in a rematch? And you often hear me say here on the channel that rematches are won by the fighter that can change.
Rematches are often won by the fighter that can make the most adjustments from the first fight going into the second.
Irrespective of how the first fight went, many felt that Brian Castano actually beat Jermell Charlo in their initial meeting, but I was of the opinion that Jermell is the one who can change ahead of a second fight, ahead of a rematch, and time has proven me right. He was able to stop Brian Castano.
So, based on that, irrespective of what we saw in the first fight between Terrence and Errol, who's the fighter that can change in a second fight?
Who's the fighter that's more capable of making adjustments that could win them the rematch? And I hate to break the news to you, but it's not Errol.
It's not Errol Spence.
I told you for 5 years his approach is too simple. The way he goes about fighting a fight, it's the kind of thing that works up until it doesn't. This presupposition that weight was the issue, that weight was the only reason that he lost.
Bullshit.
It's more bullshit his butthurt fans have been propagating because they don't want to admit that Terrence is simply the better fighter, the better boxer.
He always was.
Several outlying factors in association with their initial meeting open to speculation and interpretation. Barry McGuigan feels that Errol Spence is a shot fighter, that his punch resistance is gone. And weight, fighting at a new weight, it's not going to change anything.
Shot fighter, that's a fighter who ain't got no more punch resistance because they've taken so many punches over time, their brain has been knocked loose in their skull.
Any solid shot that lands from any halfway decent fighter is enough to floor and effectively take out a shot fighter, and Barry McGuigan feels that Errol is a shot fighter.
Maybe he is.
On the premise that he isn't, and he was simply depleted from what was a hard cut, that it was really just the weight and nothing else.
Some people feel that way.
That he will be stronger, feel more invigorated at 154 instead of killing himself to make 147. What these individuals aren't understanding is that Errol won't be the only one that feels invigorated at 154. It's not like Terrence is going to walk in there at 147 and Errol's going to be the only one that walks in at 154. Whatever benefits Errol from moving up in weight also benefits Terrence.
Yeah.
So if Errol is stronger up there, then so is Terrence.
Yeah.
Saves Terrence having to boil all the way down to 147 at 35, 36 years old.
It's not going to change anything.
Because it's Errol's approach, and his approach being too simple. That's what really got him beat. You can walk in a little bit heavier. The same punches he hit you with before are the same punches you'll be open for.
Same punches he's going to hit you with again.
Because he knows you now. He's shirt the ring with you, and of the two, Errol Spence Jr. ain't the cerebral fighter. That's Terrence. He's the thinking man's fighter. The fighter more capable of making adjustments, adding on to the success he already had.
He's got a chip on his shoulder now. Before you had an air of spontaneity. Now you don't.
Because now he knows you. He knows what you're open for, what you're susceptible to.
Errol's got heart. He's got real gumption going back there for seconds. A second beating, because that's what he's going to get.
A few more pounds aren't going to patch up the defensive deficiencies that left him open for all those counters. Errol Spence Jr. ain't no good against the southpaw.
Told you Terrence was going to come out southpaw, and I told you he was going to beat him.
He's going to beat him again. I don't expect anything to change. Just in keeping with the theme of super fights happening over there at the PBC, Canelo Alvarez moves camp to Lake Tahoe in search of high-altitude training after a decade in San Diego.
Changing things up a bit after a long while.
Undisputed super middleweight champion Canelo Alvarez is trading the seaside for a small mountain town ahead of his matchup against Jermell Charlo in Las Vegas next month on the 30th. Citing the desire to train in a high-altitude location, Alvarez has moved from his longtime training camp location and residence in San Diego and instead opted for isolation by building a training compound in Truckee, California. Truckee sits at 5,817 feet above sea level and has an estimated population of over 17,000. Alvarez has been in the incorporated town that sits just 12 miles away from Lake Tahoe ever since camp started.
The virtue of training at high altitude is a stamina benefit.
Whether you're talking about fighters that train out of Big Bear Lake or fighters that train out of Mexico City, both high-altitude locations, the benefit is a stamina benefit.
That if you can train at high altitude, you can fight better, fight longer, fight harder.
When you're not at high altitude, it's good. I'm in Truckee, California for the altitude because, you know, when I fought in Guadalajara, Mexico and beat John Ryder in May, I felt the difference in altitude. I felt better. My body felt better. I was in rehab for my hand, but I felt better in everything. So that's why I chose to come here to train in the altitude. My body feels good, Alvarez told BoxingScene.com in an interview. Alvarez could be looking for answers and the need to change things up, especially since he's openly wondered if he's lost a step over the last 3 fights dating back to May of 2022 and the second loss of his career to Dimitri Bivol.
The guy's been fighting as a professional boxer since age 15, over 60 fights. There is a need to change things up.
Though it's not one way. Canelo Alvarez may have in fact lost a step, and he may be going into this fight with certain handicaps, but the same applies to Jermell. Jermell's never fought at this weight before, never had to carry this much weight into a fight.
That's a handicap in and of itself. Alvarez trained in San Diego for the last decade, including for the first part of his camp preparing for Ryder, then relocating camp near his hometown of Jalisco. At the time, Alvarez was coming off left wrist surgery following his win against Gennady Golovkin last fall. The avid golfer Alvarez is no stranger to the Lake Tahoe area, as he has participated in several celebrity tournaments in the region over the years. Training in near isolation is also nothing new for the 33-year-old 4-division champion. Canelo might be getting long in the tooth. I don't dismiss that.
It's a distinct possibility. He used to have issues with one of his knees. Now he just had surgery on his left wrist. He's training at high altitude to change things up a bit.
After over 60 professional bouts, a bit of wear and tear is expected. That while Canelo Alvarez is 33, he's a very hard 33, very weathered.
Alvarez has also previously held camps at Big Bear Lake, California, the popular mountainside training location preferred by boxers like Gennady Golovkin, Oscar De La Hoya, and Sugar Shane Mosley, among others.
He's keeping an eye on his energy levels if he's deciding to trade at high altitude, wants to take care of his gas tank, wants to make sure it's full the night of the fight.
That he doesn't tire after 5 or 6 rounds, and it's the right idea. Jermell Charlo's going to make him work for it. Jermell Charlo's going to move. I don't think Jermell's going to try to hold the center of the ring and trade punches toe-to-toe.
No.
His strategy is likely going to look a lot like the strategy he had for Brian Castano, a short, stumpy fighter, the same way that Canelo is a short, stumpy fighter.
Wants to tire Canelo out, pick him off long range, one shot at a time, beat those feet.
It's the strategy, but once again, it's not one way. There's no such thing as a free lunch in the squared circle. Carrying more weight than he's ever carried, not being fully acclimated to super middleweight, Jermell Charlo moving around that much, it'll wear on his energy reserves as well.
The same way it wore on Caleb Plants when he fought Canelo.
Everything costs something. There's no such thing as a free lunch. When you're moving around that much,
You're burning energy.
and because Canelo's shot selection is so much more refined than what you get from a Brian Castano, while Jermell might have the right idea,
Canelo's a stronger puncher than Brian Castano and a more accurate puncher as well.
tack on his head movement, his upper body movement, that he can make you miss and make you pay in a way that Brian doesn't, because Brian's a pressure guy.
He's open for more punches than Canelo.
Volume punchers often are. Canelo has a way of applying pressure in an educated, refined way, more refined than what you get from Brian Castano.
So this thing could be competitive for the first few rounds.
See Jermell Charlo having some early success, but I think the pace of the match and the weight, having to carry it, not being acclimated to it, as well as facing a bigger puncher than he's ever faced, I think it's all going to come crashing down on Jermell.
Still intriguing, though.
It is, because we don't know if Canelo has lost a step. That's a distinct possibility as well. Has he slowed down enough that Jermell can stick him?
We'll see.